Castro from Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, for the last generation,
I'm
AdaMocho.com,
the Republican candidate
I did
for
not
governor.
have sexual relations
And
with
I
that woman.
realize that this is something
Miss
he is
Lewinsky.
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to Republican Town. Let me play something for you right now.
I'm not on the ballot this fall. Michelle's pretty happy about that. But make no mistake, these policies are on the ballot. Every single one of them.
The policies are going
This
somewhere.
isn't some official campaign speech or political speech, but
The policies are headed south. I hope back to Mexico. What do you think?
Well, to the victor goes the spoil, so I'll let John go first.
Well, I mean, the big thing for me, I think, to take away is more likely the governor's races that were lost. Obama actively, those are really the only races that he and Michelle actively campaigned in. Now, she campaigned out in Colorado and surprisingly couldn't get the Democrat candidate's name right. Called him by the wrong name, I think, a dozen times. Somebody from the crowd finally corrected her. And then when she issued a statement to kind of make up for that, she identified him as running for governor. But these governor races that were lost are pretty shocking. Maryland, nobody saw Maryland coming. Maryland is probably one of the most democratic states in the nation. Now, they've elected Republicans in the recent past, but that was a shocker. And there's some real problems when you talk about 2016. We now hold the governor's offices in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Florida, Texas. Now, Pennsylvania they did hold. But the governor's races are really quite shocking.
What's your opinion, Franklin?
Well, I think this is essentially the fourth year election in a row that the public sent a message that they want to see something get done. And I think that's the takeaway from it.
Well, do you think that...
Well, that's not the president's takeaway. He's already been quoted as saying he doesn't feel that it says anything to him.
One more time.
Well,
That was the statement out of the White House last night.
Well, I'll play this one more time, Franklin.
Michelle's pretty happy about that. But make no mistake, these policies are on the ballot.
All right, that's good enough.
Anyway, what I mean is there's already been a statement that, well, one, there's some fussing and fighting going on in the Democratic Party, and there's argument on both sides. Last night on some of the analysis, you heard some people say that had the president been asked into these races more, the Democrat candidates would have done better. There are other people that said they think they would have done worse. I do know that he did campaign in Maryland for the governor's candidate, and a few days after he made his appearance, the Democrat candidate dropped 8 or 9 percentage points in the poll. So there's some arguing going on now on whether they should have embraced him more or whether they should have stayed away more.
Opinion?
well, I think that Democrats have done a poor job over the last year of touting what I would see as successes and not embracing those things. I think that was a mistake strategically.
What are the successes?
The economy is clearly growing. The budget deficit's falling. Those are facts. I think that those are things that he should be talking about.
Well, the problem, Franklin, we've said this before, the budget deficit is falling from the all-time high that he set. So that's a false argument right there. And the fact about the economy...
First of all, the all-time high was set by the budget that he inherited when he came in, and that's true.
And
you know
most conservatives were against that as well, Franklin. So
whether
that
you
doesn't
were or
save
not,
you any.
that wasn't his policy.
But it doesn't save him any. You
And when
can't
he-
have a
no,
high and then come off the high and still be above the average.
Now, there's one thing there's one thing I do expect you to acknowledge, John, and that is that when he took office, the economy was in free fall. There's no doubt about that.
I didn't say that.
Okay,
but his policies made it worse.
No, I don't think that's true.
Frankly,
at all.
it's the slowest and longest recovery. Here's what, and you can beat your head over this all you want that they didn't do a good job telling the public. The public knows. The public feels it in their bones. He's been in office for 6 years, and when you ask, are you better off before he came or after he came, they resoundingly last night said they were better off before his policies came.
Except when they had a chance to actually vote for him again, and they overwhelmingly voted for him.
In that case, you all did a good job on your ground game of playing your identity politics, and the identity politics weren't at play last night.
Well,
and you lost.
That may be true because the analysis overnight on the election results showed that the turnout was overwhelmingly older, wider,
You're
and
right.
more male
But
than
the
it had
turnout
been in
also
previous
showed
elections.
that you all have lost the war on women. We have a lot of candidates that's actually won the women's vote. We're winning the millennial vote now because the millennials are out of a job. And they've seen this guy in office, and they've seen the fact that they can't get jobs.
Well, John, if you think that the outcome in this race somehow portends the outcome in a presidential election year, that would be ignoring.
No, I didn't say that. I mean, I'm sure they will. You all will put all your mechanisms in place, just like last night. The Justice Department had poll watchers in 18 different states. Now, in the past, the poll watchers have only been sent out when there was an actual concern or situation. But Eric Holder sent them out to 18 states, most of them states that had passed voter ID laws. Sure. And they cooperated with a George Soros-backed group to watch the polls. So I feel so confident that George Soros is going to protect the vote. So you've heard some story
about people being turned away from voting?
Well, I don't know. We had the Black Panthers turn them away in Virginia, and that this same Justice Department, not only did they not prosecute, they already had convictions, and they turned them loose.
What do you think is going to change going forward?
Well, right now there's 350 bills that have been passed by the Republican House, many of which had over 300 votes, which means they were bipartisan bills that have been sitting on Harry Reid's desk. I would hope that Mitch McConnell will immediately bring a huge chunk of those bills up for actual votes in the United States Senate.
It's rumored Obama's going to use his ink pen and...
Well, he's defiant. According to the New York Times, he feels insulted and defiant.
So he's going to get revenge. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, that was their words, not mine. See, New York Times. Now, I will tell you that he is just off of breaking the Democrats' record, which was, let's see, Truman's losses on his 2 midterms. Right now, he has broken all the other records for losses for his party. You go back to Eisenhower lost a good many for us. Clinton actually lost a net 49 House seats, but Obama has beaten that at this point, and he's beaten the Senate record as well. But, you know, by all means, don't, as a president, don't take any message out of that. You break all-time losing records for your party and for the other party.
All right.
And you don't take any message out of that.
John is partially right about something.
What?
I actually think, and I've said this in here multiple times, the Congress has done a terrible job. Now,
the House has done a great job.
See, that's the problem, John.
Are there 350 bills that were passed
John,
in the House that are sitting on Harry Reid's desk?
John,
Franklin,
John,
you know how the system works.
John,
the House did their job.
John.
Harry Reid and the Senate didn't.
You also know that you have to be able to get bills passed through 2 houses of Congress.
Well, you can't pass them when the leader of the Senate doesn't bring them up for a vote, Franklin.
It's also true, John, that the Republican House wouldn't let any of those Democratic bills come up for a vote.
They don't originate in the Senate. They originate in the House.
Not all legislation originates in the House,
Franklin,
John.
350 bills
yes,
sitting on Harry Reid's
50 votes to repeal Obamacare.
350 bills sitting on Harry Reid's desk. Not a single one brought up for a vote, Franklin. Tell me how you explain that away.
What's Harry Reid going to be doing?
He's going to be the minority leader unless he's challenged for that. And right now, no one said they thought he would be challenged. Although if I was the Democrats, I'd challenge him because he's a bigger drag on the party than the president is.
I agree. What's your opinion, Franklin?
Just what I said. The Congress is broken.
The Congress isn't broken. The Senate's been broken, and it's now going to be fixed.
John, your own Speaker of the House couldn't get a majority of his own party to vote for his proposals last time.
Franklin,
and you think it's not broken?
I think that 350 bills were passed in the system in the House under Republican control.
350 largely symbolic measures that accomplish nothing.
And Harry Reid wouldn't even bring a largely symbolic bill up, and that tells you where the real problem is.
What's going
Harry Reid and the Democrats.
What's going to happen with illegal immigrants right away?
What's going to happen with them?
I mean, is Obama going to use his ink pen, do something, pass?
Probably. He's probably going to try to.
I mean, that's what I
bait
keep
the Republicans.
That's what I keep
He's
hearing.
going to do something. He's going to bait the Republicans to try and make that a big, huge blow up issue.
Well, they could pass a bill, which they haven't done, by the way. You know.
Well, actually, they had a chance to pass a bill when Marco Rubio discussed it, and the president himself torpedoed Marco Rubio's efforts.
Let's use their number one example here. Okay, obviously the poster child for the Republicans is Obamacare.
No,
right?
actually, it's not.
Oh, well, it's 50 votes. 50 of those 350 votes you're talking about
was popular,
are to repeal
which
Obamacare.
was popular in the public.
Okay, 350 of those. Okay, but guess what? I've been listening for 6 years now to them say we've got to repeal and replace Obamacare. They have yet to introduce a bill.
It's only been in place 4 years.
All
frankly.
right, John.
Well, I mean, you know, I wouldn't want a fact to get in your way.
No, I'm all for.
You're all for a fact.
I'm so
like
overwhelmed.
when the bill was actually passed.
I'm so overwhelmed that you
well,
actually
7
went with
years, Franklin, is almost doubling the
okay,
time the bill's
4 years.
even been
you
in existence.
You are right, John. I fall at the altar of your correctness.
Well, I mean, come on, Franklin.
Now,
you
4
can't
years,
get basic
50
numbers
votes.
right.
50 votes. 4 years I've been hearing repeal and replace, and they've yet to introduce a bill for replacement because they have no plan.
Well, actually, we don't want to replace the whole thing, Franklin. We want to fix the parts that are broken.
Which part of repeal doesn't replace
You have to
it?
repeal parts
Which
to fix
parts
them.
are you going to replace?
We're going to repeal things like the individual mandate. We're going to repeal things like forcing elderly citizens to have to buy maternity care. We're going to repeal the part that forces a dentist like me to have to buy pediatric dental care. We're going to allow a cross-state competition, which we've said for years. We would love to pass tort reform, which would actually reduce the costs of these things. All of things that your party has defeated and stopped every chance they got.
I think it'll be cleaned up.
All those polls, if you look at them, when you go through those items, the majority of people don't support the things he said.
Well, Franklin,
that's a fact.
250,000 people in Virginia. One of the reasons Ed Gillespie is so close right now is 250,000 people in Virginia were told just this past month that they were going to lose their insurance on January 1st. All these people are the average premium increase is like 30 and 40% nationwide under this junk.
John. It is not.
You've got polls showing 2/3 of the doctors are not in California, huge percentages of the doctors aren't accepting it anymore.
Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate now, said just 3 weeks ago on the campaign trail that they weren't going to be able to repeal Obamacare.
Then why are you talking about it?
Because you're going to make the effort.
It's just like impeachment. The only people talking about impeachment are Democrats who are trying to create
Mitch
an issue.
McConnell said this, not me.
You're right. We said that. You're the one that brought up the 50 votes and said that's what we were going to do.
Mark my words, the first thing out of the chute is going to be a symbolic effort to pass a repeal that forces the president
You
to...
said we were going to repeal it. A minute ago, you said Mitch McConnell said we weren't going to repeal it. Now you're saying we're going to repeal it again.
What I said is that's all y'all talk about, but you never offer the alternative.
Mitch McConnell just said we weren't going to do it. You just quoted him.
He said we
Make up your mind, Franklin.
We won't be able to.
Look, you can try to confuse the voters,
I'm not
which is
confusing
what
anybody,
you all
John.
do.
I'm just pointing out the
But
hypocrisy.
facts are facts.
You're the one touting, we passed 350 bills. 350 bills to do nothing.
Franklin, you're missing my point. What I said was there's a system. The House Republicans functioned as they were supposed to. Many of those bills had over 300 votes, which means Democrats voted for them. So you can slander them all you want and say they were nothing bills, but Democrats supported them. That's a bipartisan supported bill passed out of the House, which is the way any child who's taught our government functions knows that's what the House does. They sent it over to Harry Reid, and he refused to have any votes. So when you say the system is broken,
John,
it was Harry Reid and the Democrat Senate that was broken.
John, The House doesn't send a bill over there. They have a different bill that comes up in the Senate.
This is the Democrat lawyer explaining this to you. They passed in the House. Harry Reid wouldn't vote for him, plain and simple. Harry Reid wouldn't vote.
You change your statement
Harry
every 5
Reid
minutes.
wouldn't vote, Franklin. How can you defend that? And on
I'm
top of that,
not defending it.
y'all
In
got
fact,
your butt kicked.
I'm the one who's been in here telling you the system
No,
was
you
broken.
have yet to say it's not the system. It's the Democrat Senate.
What a joke. For you to actually
Well, let's
look
just
into
watch
that
and see
camera there
as-
and say it with a straight face.
Franklin, when you pass a bill out of the House and you don't even allow it to come up for a vote in the Senate, the problem's the Senate.
Really? Is it a problem when the Senate can't get enough votes to get the supermajority required to get a vote
Well,
over
I don't
there?
know, Franklin.
When it's
We
the
functioned under
Republicans
those
stopping
rules
that?
for 200 years, but apparently when the public
No,
doesn't do what
this-
you good
this is-
liberal
no,
progressives
this is
want,
the- this
then
is
you
the
change the
hypocrisy,
rules.
John. This
No,
is
the
the
hypocrisy
hypocrisy.
is people like you
This is
saying,
the
you didn't
hypocrisy.
do what I wanted, so you're obviously too stupid to decide, so I'm going to change the rules
No.
like Harry Reid did on the supermajority.
There's majorities to pass things through the Senate the whole time.
How long have those
but
rules
the
been in place?
Republicans wouldn't let it
How
come up
long
for a
have
vote.
those rules been in place and functioning for the United States Senate and the United States of America,
Well,
Franklin?
the rules have been in place a long
years.
time.
200
Functioning
years.
well, first of all, that's not true.
Okay, that rule.
That's not true, is it?
What is
No,
it, 120 years?
Less than that.
Okay.
So don't
Did it-
put it on the
100 years.
founding
I'm sorry,
fathers.
folks.
100 years.
How long's it been, Franklin?
Oh, guess what? That's the same system that kept us with segregated lunch counters because we couldn't get a vote up.
Well, no, actually, Franklin,
No, it is,
I'm glad you
John.
brought that up because it was the Republicans who championed all those bills.
That's
and it
great.
was the Democrat Party that was blocking them. So all
Well,
of
it
the
was the
minority
Democrat- it
people
was the
that
Democrats
you all
in the
sell
South.
to, you all are the very party that denied them their rights.
The point's still the same, John.
That you all
the
denied
system
all the
was
minorities
used to
their
prevent
rights.
people from making
So
progress.
Harry Reid is now a champion for changing the rules when it suited him. Let's see how he likes
We
it
all
now.
ought to be in favor of that. Are you going to be in favor of it now that you're in charge? I doubt it.
Actually, Franklin, I'm really torn about that.
Well, good.
Because I
Good.
don't like people
That would
who
be
can't, I
progress.
don't like people who can't play by the rules.
That would
but
be
here's
progress.
the problem for me, Franklin. Republicans tend to play by rules like that. The Democrats tend to cheat, and then we lose. So it's very difficult to turn around once we win a race and go, okay, we're going to put the very same constrictions on us that they took off of
Well,
themselves.
make no mistake about it. The voters did send a message last night, and the message is, all right, let's see if these guys can get something done. Show
You're
me
right.
if they can do it.
You're right.
Thus far, what I predict is the Republican Party is going to go to war with itself
No,
now.
it won't.
Well, it's what happened this last time. Boehner couldn't get his troops to vote for his plan.
Actually,
he's still
Franklin,
the Speaker of the House.
We voted for all kinds of things, and you know what? The Speaker's supposed to win every single vote.
I think now that the Republicans are going in the majority, that everybody's going to have a lot of kumbaya. Everybody's going to start getting along all of a sudden,
We shall see.
just like they do on Backfire.
Well, the big thing will be, what's the president going to do? You know, is he going to reach it? You know, he doesn't have a relationship with the Democrats in the House and the Senate. He certainly doesn't have a relationship with the Republicans. Is he going to reach out? That's one of the problems, Franklin. That's one of the things
I
we're
got a
trying to
feeling
get to.
Obama's going to play
He
golf
was defiant.
for 2 years.
And he says that there's no message in this election for him. Now, when the Republicans lost in 06 and when we lost in 08, he and Nancy Reid and Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi and Obama all said there were huge messages. But now that they've lost, they don't think there's any message here. So the real question is not Republicans, it's the president. What's he going to do, Franklin? He's the great uniter. Is he going to try to unite?
We shall see.
All right, what's going to happen to religion, Constitution, foreign relations, unions, and health care?
Well, I think healthcare, I think you will actually see legislation come up in pieces. I think the Republicans will basically chunk away at things that they think are important. They're going to probably take away, like, the tax on medical devices. That's a bipartisan issue,
Yeah.
and that's actually been passed in the House, and Harry Reid wouldn't allow it to come for a vote in the Senate. So there's a way the system was working until Harry Reid stopped it. But that bill will pass in the Senate now. And the president will have to decide, is he going to sign a bill repealing an incredibly, not only unpopular with the public, but everybody, both sides agreed that was a mistake.
Well, here's what you'll see.
Companies have left America because of
No, it pushed the cost of your
Jobs
knee
are coming
joint
back to
surgery.
America.
because of the tax on the
Medical device.
Yeah.
Manufacturing jobs are coming back to America. That's a fact. That's what's
Well,
been happening
That's
over the
another
last
thing.
2
You'll
years.
actually see tax reform, I think, get out, and that's a huge part of that. You'll see more manufacturing jobs get out if we could reform our tax system, and that's a bipartisan desire. Now, where that'll work out in the House and the Senate, I don't know. But the real point again comes back to whatever comes out, the president has to decide whether he's going to sign it or not. And so far, he's acts basically like a petulant child whenever he's rebuked. And so we'll have to see. Did he grow up a little bit? Did he mature a little bit? Or is he going to be the same petulant
what
child?
we'll see is if the Ted Cruz wing of the Republican Party is going to run things.
Ted Cruz here's the deal, Franklin. Ted Cruz has one vote. The president has to decide whether to sign a bill or not.
He may have one vote, but that doesn't mean there aren't other people in the body
Well,
who
you
are
know
listening
what?
to
When
him.
something passes, it passes, and then the president has to decide whether
we
to
will
sign it or
see,
not.
John, if it passes
Well, is your
that
guy
way.
going to sign bills that come out?
Depends on what the bill is.
Well, I mean,
That's the way the system's supposed to work. That's the rules you
medical
like, right?
device tax. You think he'll sign a repeal of that?
I think that if that comes out as a standalone bill, there's a good chance that it will.
Well, it
pass.
will.
I don't know that that'll happen at all.
Absolutely, that will happen.
I think it may come out with a bunch of stuff attached to it, and that's when we'll have the fight.
Do you think
See, that's part of the problem here, and surely John would agree with this point. Many of these bills that he was talking about were not standalone measures. They're bills where you have this attached to it and this attached to it. Oh, well, you're gonna, and then they want to say, well,
Actually,
you wouldn't approve this.
350, Franklin, are pretty much standalone bills. Now,
were
you're
not.
right. When you get the big spending bills and things like that, they attach all kinds of things to it. But most of these bills were standalone bills. Here's the point, Franklin. How can you defend this? Let's say the Republicans in the House passed a horrible bill. Why would Harry Reid not bring it up for a vote in the Senate? And then the Democrats could go on the Senate floor. They could tell the American public how horrible the bill was, and they could vote it down. And then the public would go, well, gosh, that's the way government works, and that bill wasn't worth passing.
The answer to that question, John, and it's an example of what I said earlier about how the system is broken, is that Harry Reid tried to insist on a price being paid for that. The price was, okay, we'll bring these bills up for a vote, but you've got to agree to allow our bills to come up for a vote, which they wouldn't do. That's what I mean
Franklin,
when I say the system is broken.
he broke the 60-vote rule.
Only with respect to those judicial appointments.
Oh, but he said he didn't want it for anything else. So now you're saying he did want it?
No, he didn't seek to change the rules with respect to those.
Because he said he didn't need that.
But the point is...
But you're saying he does need that now.
I didn't say he needs anything, John. What I said is, don't tell me that it's just the Senate that's not functioning right.
But Franklin, here's the point.
It's not just the Democrats.
The House is functioning fine. Things come up, they're voted on, and they either pass or they fail. The Republicans are in charge of the House, and bills come out of the House.
Except for that goofy Hastert rule, which is part of the problem also.
Franklin, bills come out of the House?
Some bills
Well, that's
came out.
the end of the system, isn't it?
No, it isn't.
No,
the
what
end
I mean
of the
is
system,
from the
John.
House's standpoint, Franklin.
It's not the end of the
From the
system.
House's standpoint, it is until the Senate passes it. You can't have reconciliation.
No, but that's the thing. You see, here's what was happening. Yes, the House would pass these bills.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be Senate bills that would come up, and because the Republicans wouldn't agree to those, they wouldn't allow those to come to the vote for to the floor for a vote.
Franklin,
so you couldn't ever get to the reconciliation
Harry Reid hasn't allowed
process.
anything to come to the floor for a vote.
He wouldn't allow the Republican bills because
basically,
the Republicans wouldn't allow the Democratic bills.
The Senate hadn't passed a budget in 7 years.
John,
now, wait a minute,
John,
Franklin. How long have y'all been in charge of the Senate? How long? How long you had a majority in the Senate?
The 6 years.
2006.
Okay.
Which is 8 years.
Okay.
You haven't passed a bill since you all took the Senate. I haven't passed a budget. Explain that to me.
Okay. John, I'm not
Explain
defending
it to me.
I'm
You
not
are in charge. You have the majority.
Here's the problem,
you can pass
John.
anything you want to pass.
You can't understand.
I
So
understand
somehow-
perfectly.
No, you can't.
can't accept that the public doesn't believe in you all's progressive views.
It's not a question of that. The problem is that you can't bring yourself to admit that Republicans and Democrats are involved in the broken nature of our current system.
Franklin, after
That is a fact.
the Republicans took the House, what happened? We passed a budget. The House passed a
Okay.
budget. The Senate hadn't passed. The Democrats have been in charge of the Senate. They
Okay.
haven't passed a budget in 7 years.
Okay.
Explain to me how Republicans share that blame.
I didn't say they shared the blame
Yes,
for
you
that.
did. You're saying the
I
system.
didn't,
I'm
John.
telling you the system in the House
Come on,
is
John,
working
quit.
because Republicans are in charge of it. The system in the Senate that the Democrats are in charge of is not working, although that has been fixed as of last night.
John wants it both ways.
No, I want you to do your job, Harry Reid. You wouldn't do your job.
I want the Republicans to come to the table and allow the process to
Guess
work.
what? We came to the table in the House and passed a budget, and your buddies in the Senate who are in the majority couldn't pass a budget. Your own guys couldn't do it, Franklin.
We could do this right now. We could have said that we're going to allow bills in the Senate to come up for a vote, and we're going to have the House versions come in, and then we're going to go to the conference committee and see if we could come up with a bipartisan agreement on a bill then. That could have easily happened. Don't tell me the Republicans weren't involved in stopping that process,
Franklin,
John. You know it's
this
true.
is easy to prove. The medical device tax passed in the House, huge numbers, bipartisan support. Harry Reid.
You only want it for the bills you like, though.
Listen, Franklin,
You
of
won't let-
course, that's common sense.
It's gridlock.
No,
That's
it's
the
not.
problem.
Guess what, Franklin? The public wants a repeal of the medical device tax. The House Republicans gave it to them with the support of House Democrats. Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats wouldn't allow it on the floor for a vote. Explain to me how Republicans have any blame in that.
Because they wouldn't allow any Democratic bills to come up for a vote.
Oh, so Harry Reid's, once again, now not only do we have a petulant child in the White House, we have a petulant child in charge of that Senate.
what we have is a bunch of freaking
you
hypocrites.
didn't do what I wanted, so I'm not going to give you this. Even though the public wants it,
Here-
the business people want it, the medical
The
community wants
the
it.
public wants a
Everybody
lot of
thinks
things,
it's a great.
John.
Oh, and you're the liberal who decides what they get and don't get. Thank you, Franklin, for clearing that up.
John, is the word hypocrite in the dictionary next to your picture?
No, it's got Harry Reid and
your
Nancy
party-
Pelosi's picture there.
For God's sakes, John, your party is equally
My
responsible
party
for the gridlock.
passed 350 bills out of the House. Your party wouldn't allow them to come to a vote.
What?
Why can't you admit that
John!
Harry Reid is a loser and he's been a horrible majority leader and he's destroyed the mechanism of the United
John,
States Senate?
I can only hope that on Sunday morning you fall down on your knees and beg for forgiveness for the big whopper you just told.
Franklin,
that is ridiculous.
When Bill Frist was in charge of the Senate voted on things.
Wow! And guess what? Guess what? They didn't have 60 votes then either.
No,
That means-
you're right.
you know
and
what?
guess what? It still
Guess what
functioned.
that means?
It still functioned,
That
didn't it?
means
Thank
the
you
Dem-
for
that
making
means
my
the
point.
Democrats
Thank
and the
you.
minority had
Thank
to
you
let
for
things
making
come
my
for a
point,
vote.
Franklin. It
No,
still worked.
you made
It
my
still, No, I
point.
didn't.
You made my point,
No, I didn't,
John.
Franklin.
That means the Democrats who were there allowed things to come up for a vote.
Franklin?
What a bunch of rancid hypocrisy.
Franklin.
You cannot see past the R on the ballot.
Let me
That's
ask
all
you a
you
question,
care about.
Franklin.
The fact is, if
Franklin,
Satan
calm
ran
down.
as a Republican, you'd vote for
Calm
him.
down, Franklin. Let me explain something to you. I worked in the United States Senate.
I know you did,
Guess who?
and you
guess,
know the stuff
Franklin,
you're saying
guess
is false.
who sets the calendar for the United States Senate? Who sets the
John?
calendar? Franklin. Who
John?
sets it? Who sets it?
John,
Answer the question,
can
Franklin.
a vote come up
Answer.
without 60 votes? You know it can't happen.
No, you're wrong, Franklin. You're absolutely
John.
wrong. The United
Please,
States
God.
Senate, listen to me carefully. The United States Senate calendar.
If your children looked at you
Franklin,
like that and said something,
if you'd like to
you'd
learn
spank
something,
them.
I'll be glad to tell you.
Oh, please, John, teach me about
The
civics.
majority leader of the United States Senate sets the calendar. Harry Reid decides what comes up and what doesn't come up. Now, you're right. Something may not pass. The
Pass,
minority.
it doesn't come up for a vote.
Franklin, you're wrong. It has to
John.
go on the calendar to come up for a vote.
John.
Harry Reid won't put it on the calendar.
John.
He won't put it on
John.
the calendar.
Did he put any Democratic votes on the calendar?
No, actually, they voted on almost nothing
Franklin.
because what he's been
Franklin.
doing is he's been protecting
John,
his Democrats.
you're losing all credibility
No,
right
frankly,
now.
well, one, I didn't have any credibility with you anyway.
Oh, you
so
used
it's
to-
not
you
like
used
there's
to.
anything to lose.
I used to think you were just
Franklin,
nuts. Now
the
I know you're
schedule is
dishonest.
set by the majority leader, and he won't. I'll go back. The medical device tax is supported on both sides of the aisle. Why would Harry Reid not allow that to come to a vote?
Because he's not going to allow only Republicans
So
votes
he's a
to come
petulant child who won't allow one bill to pass that he knows everybody wants and that will be good. So thank you, thank you, Franklin, for admitting that the Democrats are extorting the American public. Harry Reid and the Democrats, you are comfortable with them extorting the American public.
All right, let's take time and let's have a break. Both of you go to your corners. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into Cash.
The cash you need is closer than you think.
Get an auto title loan today for up to $2,500 at Check Into Cash.
You drive home with the cash in your pocket.
Visit Check Into Cash for an auto title loan today, or get a payday advance for up to $425. Call toll-free 877-262-CASH. Title loan amount determined by value of car and ability to repay. Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or buy today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
Coach to Coach is sponsored by two great Cleveland, Tennessee institutions. Check Into Cash, founded in 1993, the pioneer of payday advances, and Hardwick Clothes, founded in 1880. Visit checkintocash.com to explore our micro-lending products, including installment and title loans. Hardwick.com, America's oldest tailored clothing maker, offers made-in-America quality suits and blazers. Visit us online and support two Tennessee legends.
Wow, that's pretty hard.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or buy today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
Hello, this is Josh Weekly with the Bald Headed Bistro, inviting you to come out every Wednesday at 5:30 and enjoy the music of JoJo Collins on the patio. And while you're here, check out our two new community tables we just added. The best place in town to meet new people, here at the Bald Headed Bistro.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com is making a splash. Dig it.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
From 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239. Or go see him
every Saturday
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933. 961-7239.
No dealers allowed.
Now, I'm not on the ballot this fall. Michelle's pretty happy about that. But make no mistake, these policies are on the ballot. Every single one of them.
All right.
This isn't some official campaign speech or political speech.
All right. The phone lines are open if you want to give us a call, 614-555-5553 or whatever it is.
There you go.
Pick
a number out of the bunch.
614-555-3. That's it. I hadn't done that in a long time. There, look at here. There it worked. Magic. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Let's move on.
I'm sorry. You're breaking up.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. Is this the Liar's Table?
Do what now?
Is this the Liar's Table?
No.
No.
The Liar's Table's up there.
Up where?
Up at the radio station.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. But listen, I've got a question for John and Franklin. Let's move on to something a little bit different this past week.
Wait a minute. Did you vote?
Yes, I.
Huh?
Yes, I.
I'm sorry. Couldn't hear you. Did you vote?
Yes, I did.
Then you're allowed to ask a question.
Okay, thanks a lot. The lady that took her life in Colorado, what do the guys there in the studio think about this law? And do you all think that every state in the union should have doctors that can issue the drug for people to take their own lives when they have a terminal illness?
Well, thanks for your question, and we're talking about Oregon. It's the only state.
In Oregon, not Colorado.
Yeah, it's in Oregon, and
Oregon passed a bill a few years back by public referendum. It was passed by the people out there that allowed doctors to give a prescription for a lethal dose of certain medications if individuals met certain criteria, and one of them was that you had a documented terminal illness, or in some cases, extraordinarily painful condition that's above and beyond what the normal things that people go through. All in all, I'd have to say that I probably support that kind of autonomy for somebody. I know the statistics have been that I think I saw something like 800 and something people have asked for the prescription in Oregon. But what's interesting about it is only about 1/4 of them actually used it. The others said that knowing they had that ability to control their outcome made their condition more tolerable for them. So I'm sure it's for the overwhelming number of people there, that's a very serious, hard thought out decision that they go through. And since none of us actually walk in those individual shoes, it's hard for me to argue that they shouldn't have that autonomy.
Well, it's not as hard for me to argue. I mean, I believe in the election process, and if that's what the public, votes, that we have to agree to it. But I think it's a pretty good reflection of the moral decay. Because as a Christian, I believe it's a moral sin. And I believe that you're making an earthly decision that condemns you to an eternity that you probably won't like. Now, the real problem here, so you want to see where this leads. Oregon may have tailored it pretty precisely, and Franklin probably described it pretty well. The problem is, go look at Denmark. Denmark has done this, and what you see there is you see the social progression that happens. You move off of terminal illnesses and you move to depressive illnesses. I just don't want to be here anymore.
Right.
Now they've got children that are actually being allowed to commit suicide, and then you get into who decides who's mentally capable of doing that. And the real problem is, eventually down the line, you can get into state sponsored suicide, where the state says, well, you're going to cost too much. we can't treat you anymore because there are other illnesses that are more productive to society. You've got people involved in creating Obamacare that actually did studies that put a value per day on human life as far as tax revenue that was generated. One of the guys that actually was on the committee creating Obamacare put a value on human life. I find all of that incredibly scary, and if you want to see the progression of this, look to Denmark and see where it's gone over there.
It's a scary thing for Americans, I think, and like anything, I think that would be very much abused.
Well, there's no evidence that it's been abused in Oregon.
No, I mean, I'm saying anywhere else, Franklin.
This young lady was someone who was full of life, had a very athletic, adventurous lifestyle. She had just gotten married. She was very happy. She thought she had her whole life ahead of her, and she was told that she has a progressively awful, always fatal kind of brain cancer, something that's actually killed friends of mine, and that she had as much as a year to live, and it was only going to get worse, and the last several months can be truly horrible.
Do you think?
And she decided that she wanted to be responsible for that, and she did not want to go through those last few months.
Look,
and her family supported her in that decision.
They did. And look, I'm not arguing at all with her feelings. I'm not arguing with her desire. I understand completely, and I'm not arguing with it. I'm saying that as a society, though, we do have to set guidelines and rules, and sometimes you have individual examples. And Franklin and I argue over this. I personally find the liberal is a little bit more driven by the heart, and the conservatives driven a little bit more by logic. And you bring up an example like this, Franklin, and you want to make the rule on this example, on this exception, basically. My problem is I look at someone like Stephen Hawking. By any objective reasoning, you could say there's no reason for Stephen Hawking to continue to live. He's miserable. He can't move anything but his mouth. He has to be in pain. I'm sure there's bed sores involved in the positioning where he is required to sit. And yet, what has he contributed to society? Now, he's an atheist, but he has contributed incredible contributions to society in his field.
But Stephen Hawking wanted to
But you're missing my point, Franklin. What could this girl, and I'm not arguing with her emotional devastation, but who could she have touched in the next year? What impact could she have had?
Maybe she had an impact with this.
I think this is dangerous. Look at Denmark, and you will see where some of this leads.
All right, let's follow up behind her and talk about this nurse Casey Hitchcock.
She's selfish, and she is the worst of our society.
She's the nurse that didn't want to take the 21
days.
21 days. That had been around Ebola patients.
And she apparently has been bolstered by the White House in this bid.
What's your opinion of her, Franklin?
Well, first of all, I don't know how we would describe somebody who put themselves potentially at jeopardy to help other people as the worst of us.
That's a
strange characterization.
No, it's not. She's the worst of us.
Well,
she's selfish. She's self-absorbed, and she's doing this for the attention, and she's putting other people at risk.
She's not thinking.
I have mixed feelings about this issue, but I hear these people say, "Well, we're just following the science." Well,
we're following the science.
Well, Franklin, we're following the science with the U.S. military. Is there a different science for a military person versus a civilian nurse?
Probably the difference is that those individuals, by definition, are coming back to be in a huge group of people day after day after day after day.
So a nurse working in a hospital with sick people isn't in a day after day condition.
No, we're talking about when they come back, John.
I'm saying her job's a nurse, correct?
Well, she didn't disagree with not going to work at that point.
She disagreed with not going in the grocery store, not going in the cafe.
Yeah.
Franklin, what's wrong with people? And what's wrong with you if you can't look at that on a black and white and go, look, girl, stay in your house for 21 days so you don't put someone else's life at risk.
Don't be so selfish.
Here's the problem. they told this person she couldn't have family over.
Yeah.
Really? You can't have your family over?
Well, you shouldn't. If you got any sense.
Whether you should or should not, it's a different question for a.
Well, Franklin, you're right.
The guy who's who always wants to be less
If the family
government,
wants to come
supposedly.
join her and sit with her for 21 days, that's fine.
No, you're missing the point. Then they have to watch the family. I hate to break this is where I get frustrated with the progressives, Franklin. There's a little thing called quarantine that has worked for thousands of years, but somehow we've now decided that quarantine is not politically correct. And so even though it's worked for thousands of years and it's just plain common sense, we're not going to do it. And quite frankly, Franklin, that's why y'all got shellacked, in the president's words, in the election yesterday, because the public is able to see common sense. And when a progressive says stuff that is just so blatantly silly,
John,
that's why you get shellacked.
If 3 months ago or 4 months ago we had told the public that here's what's going to happen from the Ebola crisis. In the next 3 months, not one single American citizen is going to die from it. Would you have said that policy was a failure? I'd say it was a smashing
Franklin,
success.
The fact that no one dies from it is because we have incredibly good health care in this country.
Yes, that's
if you
right.
really want
We
to
do
talk
now.
about,
We do now.
really want to talk about a health issue, talk about the fact that apparently there's some concern that the president's open border policy is actually the cause
We don't
of the
have an open border
enterovirus
person.
that has killed.
We don't have an open
We do
border
have an
policy.
open border policy, Franklin, and you know it. Here's the story. We allowed all these
an
kids.
illegal alien? Let me ask what an illegal alien is.
Oh, don't say illegal. Well, that's not sensitive to their.
We don't have an open border, but we have illegal aliens.
How do you become an illegal alien if you don't have an open border?
Well, I don't know. Talk to Canada about it. We've got an open border there, too.
Here's the Steve.
What is
What
your
I'm
point?
getting at is there's a story here that the enterovirus has popped up in multiple cities across the country, and epidemiologists are looking at that and saying it's not a likely pattern for the way that normally would show up. So what they're concerned with is all these children that the president allowed to come across the southern border into Texas. And then he rounded them up and bussed them in the dark of night into cities and states all over the country without even notifying the governors of those states that they're coming. If they had enterovirus, which we're afraid some of them did, you have now, through the taxpayer dollars, under the president's orders, spread that virus all across the country. And Franklin, people have died from that. Children.
So you didn't think they should be rounded up?
I didn't think they should have been shipped all over the country, and certainly not without telling governors of the states that you were doing it. I think they should have been sent back to the country they came from, and we talked about that in the summer. But the point here is, Franklin, this is real simple. All you got to do is test the DNA of the enterovirus that's popping up all around the country. If it tests that the strain comes from Honduras or Guatemala or wherever these kids, the bulk of these kids came from, quite frankly, your president has blood on his hands.
Yes,
Laugh all you want, Franklin.
Yes, John.
Enterovirus is actually more dangerous than
Because the
Ebola.
enterovirus couldn't have come here by somebody who crossed
Franklin,
the border legally, right?
I hate to break this to you.
Is that right?
Scientists look at these things from a fact-based standpoint.
I
When the
wish you looked at
enterovirus
things from
pops
a
up,
fact-based
look,
and-
when it pops up in New York and Chicago and Denver and Dallas and Los Angeles,
First of all-
you look at that and you go, that's
First of
not
all-
normal.
We have enterovirus in the United States
Then all
every
we have to do
single
is
year.
test it. All we have to do is
Every
test.
year we have it.
We
right?
don't have these kind of outbreaks. This isn't me, Franklin. This is the Centers for Disease Control. This is the
And
experts.
most of the flu viruses we get start in Asia. Can you stop that, John?
You can keep if you
Really,
know people.
can ya?
If you know people in Asia are having a huge outbreak, you say we're not going to allow them to come to our country. Because I hate to break this to you, Franklin, but the president's first rule is to protect the citizens of the United States, not the citizens of the world.
Yes, we know that Republicans are all going to jump on that bandwagon. We're going to shut down all travel back and forth with Asia.
We're going to shut down travel with the affected countries in Africa, just like all the other countries in
But
Africa
the problem
did.
is you're just inviting people to lie at that point. That's part of the problem. You say the science have the way. It's the scientists who are telling you that this approach is wrong.
Franklin, the scientists are saying it's right for the military, but it's wrong for the civilians. Science doesn't do that.
No.
What are all the military people have some kind of different biology?
What they're saying is the travel ban you've been touting is a bad policy. That's what the scientists have said. Now, I don't claim to know.
Franklin,
I don't claim to know. I'm not an
the
expert on
scientists
this.
in Britain, not the scientists in France, not the scientists in Germany, not the scientists in every other nation in Africa.
Au contraire, John.
Guess what? The vice president just bragged on Cuba and their policy. You know what their policy was? Quarantine and a ban on travel.
What about our Marine veteran out of jail finally?
No thanks to the White House or the administration.
Isn't that amazing?
Now, you can trade 5 terrorists for a deserter, but you can't even ask the Mexican government to release our guy.
By the way, what happened to the investigation on the 5 terrorists we traded for?
Well, the latest numbers on Guantanamo are horrible as far as how many of them are going back to the battlefield. Those guys, I'm not sure we can even identify them anymore. We're not sure where they're at.
The 5 we released?
They're supposed to be in the country we released them to, but the last time I checked, they couldn't find them.
Yeah.
What, you went by their house there and knocked on the door?
No, actually, journalists went by and knocked on their door.
Right.
Journalists actually went to the address that was listed as where they were at, and they weren't there.
Has is it Tamaruski, the Marine that was released? I mean, that's kind of quiet news, too. Nothing's been announced about him since he came home. I mean, I haven't heard much about him on any of the news.
He's apparently suffering from PTSD, and that was the card that the Mexican judge used to release him. The real question for us is, why wouldn't our government outside, Congress, and there were Democrat congressmen and Republican congressmen that worked on this, so that was bipartisan on that level, but our president and our Secretary of State and our executive level did nothing to help him.
Do you think they did nothing because he was carrying arms and they wanted to make an issue about arms?
I don't know.
I mean, why do you think the president wouldn't offer to help this guy?
Didn't even ask. No, the question is they didn't even ask.
What I can tell you is that the Mexican government thinks that our policies are very hypocritical.
Frankly, that's not an answer to the question.
And that we hold, no, it is.
We're asking you why the president didn't lift a finger to help
That we
him.
hold their citizens to a different standard than we hold our own.
Frankly,
that's what they.
We're not talking about Mexico. We're talking about the president. Why did he not at least ask Mexico?
You don't know if he asked or not.
Yes, we do.
You don't know what happened behind the
Franklin,
scenes, John.
he didn't ask.
Well, I'm sure he would have told us if he had of.
He would have shown the letter that he sent.
I mean, there was a lot of.
John Kerry met with the Foreign Secretary of Mexico the week after all of this sort of was erupting and didn't even bring it up.
What about all the signatures and everything from Americans that was sent to President Obama to do something?
It was over 100,000 signed the petition.
Yeah, and that's that didn't even get. It didn't get anything.
Oh, I thought he did something because didn't he promise if you got 25,000 signatures, he'd do it?
Yeah.
And then when some signatures at 25 weren't what he wanted to do, he raised it to 100. And now you're telling me even after we got 100, he still didn't do it?
I just don't understand the situation with the veteran. I hope the veterans never forget.
It's a clear disrespect.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about Oregon and Alaska just a moment. They had recreational marijuana on the ballot, and of course, I read articles that that was put on the ballot to try to draw in some Democratic votes. In Florida, medical marijuana was on the ballot. They thought that was going to draw in some votes. The marijuana did pass, but the people they hoped to get elected didn't win, did they?
No.
Man, it was a sweep, wasn't it?
What
is there any of the Democrats that did win?
Well, I mean, there were some you expected to win. Pennsylvania won.
Yeah.
Illinois is a huge shocker for the president. And matter of fact, we took a House seat up there. We took a seat in 2010 in the northern suburbs of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
We lost that in 12 when Obama, was reelected. Well, the guy that lost it has now regained that seat, the Republican.
And you got Kentucky was a big win, and Georgia was a huge win.
Georgia wasn't even close.
I know it, but they thought that it was going to be a loss for the Republicans down there.
They did. Well, Kay Hagan's probably one of their most painful losses in North Carolina.
All right, let's talk about what good is going to come from this. We've got 2 years before the next presidential election. What do you really think we can get accomplished in the next 2 years? Is Mr. Obama going to stick his head in the sand and go play golf, or just run out, or is he going to try to work?
I think that there are opportunities there. Whether anything will happen or not, I don't know. The opportunities, I think, are there for corporate tax reform. I think for an immigration bill, which is way overdue. I think that the student loan reform part certainly ought to have bipartisan support. There are chances there. I hope it comes to fruition. We'll see.
I think, one of the things about chasing the car is when you catch the car, what are you going to do with it? So I do think Republicans have an obligation to show that they can do something, and it'll be interesting to see how they play that. Now, I think the president has to decide the tone that he's going to take with Congress. I don't think that the statements that came out of the White House last night, according to the New York Times, are helpful. And I hope that when the sting of this loss sort of fades a little bit, that he will understand that we have divided government, and in divided government, no one gets everything that they want, and you have to compromise a little bit. And I hope he will stay away from these executive orders. I think that is, and that's a Republican and Democrat, liberal and conservative concern. Jonathan Turley, very, very liberal law professor at George Washington University, very concerned about the overreach of the executive branch. And he was concerned about it with Bush. But he feels, and as liberal as he is, he feels that this president has really, really pushed that envelope, and that it's a threat to our democracy.
Well, the Constitution has been a threat too, hasn't it? Hasn't it been jeopardized?
Well, the executive actions, the problem with the executive actions is when he does it, you have to take him to court. And it's a huge, long process to see how that shakes out, and then you get into this court, and it has to be appealed.
Actually, what you can do is win the next election, and the next president could rescind that order.
He can, but the problem is you've still established the concept that the president can do those things.
Well, it's been established for a long time.
Right, but people are concerned about it, frankly.
Well,
liberals and conservatives.
I can only say that I haven't seen their concern when other
That's not
presidents were
true.
doing
People
it.
were concerned with a lot of the executive orders Bush did as well, and it's only steadily grown.
Well, I was proud to see Republicans come out and vote. Americans came out and vote. I don't know how many Democrats crossed over.
Well, now we're actually winning the millennials at this point, and the war on women is probably a dead issue for the Democrats, and actually probably hurt them.
Well, actually, female turnout was lower this time.
Well, we still won it, but we won it, Franklin.
No, you didn't win
Well,
it.
in some states we did. In some states we did. In the past, we've lost it
overall.
substantially.
That did not prove to be the case. I will say that
Colorado was probably lost because of that tactic on the Democrats' part.
Possibly, although that's not clear, because the Republican who was elected basically came out to the left of Obama on a couple of issues.
He's more socially liberal.
Well, I'm saying that's true. That's true, though. You say that.
Franklin, the endorsement in that state came because they said the Democrat was a one-note campaign, and it was the war on women. And that women were smarter than that.
I'm not criticizing the voters. I'm saying that's a fact, though. The candidate who won came out with some very liberal, progressive views.
But Franklin,
and that was the basis.
That's actually
Republican. They also voted down overwhelmingly, for example, a personhood amendment in Colorado. It only got 39% of the vote there.
And in Tennessee, we passed Amendment 1.
Yes, we did, but we passed it with what, 52%. I mean, it's clearly a divided issue for the state. Surely you'd agree with that.
No, actually, I wouldn't, because all of the money that was supporting yes was from in the state, and all the money that was supporting no was actually from the largest abortion provider in the country, Planned Parenthood, which is actually, in my opinion, a racistly based organization. If you look at their folks, please Google Margaret Sanger and her creation of Planned Parenthood and read about it. Please read about Margaret Sanger.
I want to say
he died 70 years ago.
Who the president just gave an award to.
Hey, Franklin, I want to congratulate you for being here this morning. Thank you.
Well,
you too, John.
I was happy to crow in 2012. I'll come take my medicine in 2014.
Here's what I'd like to conclude from this. I hope that Republicans can get some things accomplished in a positive way. I hope that the Democrats can learn to work with some of the Republicans here. But I really want us to be careful and not screw up the presidential election in 2016. That's the carrot we need.
Well, now that we didn't get into that, but that's a problem for Hillary too. There were a lot of races that she went into that did not work out. So, they were already talking about a coronation. If I were Franklin, I would be concerned about Hillary being coronated. I don't mean that badly. I actually think there are capable people in the Democrat Party, fresher, younger. I think there are capable, fresher, younger people in the Republican Party. And I'm not sure this idea of someone being around for 20, 30, 40 years is particularly good.
I think Hillary would be a good candidate. I think the Democrats need to run her. That'd be a good one.
Well, be careful what you ask for.
That's my pick.
You may get it.
Well, I think it'd be a great accomplishment for the Republicans to have her running. Myself, I just don't think she's accomplished anything, and it's going to be hard to convince everyone that she's going to be the one to lead us. So, I would go with that. I think the Republicans ought to be proud to go against her.
I don't mind to go against her. I just.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Republicans might ought to focus on who they pick for themselves first.
All right, you're right. We should. All right, that's another week. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at